I'm Barry Black. I grew up right down the road, and as a kid, I helped my grandfather Nathaniel Black, my uncle Jim Black, and my father Harold Black log right from a very young age. In fact, I was so young that these days they would really frown on it. But I enjoyed it, and I kept doing it. Even when I branched off and did other things, I kept doing it. And then in 1988, I decided to buy the family sawmill up on Hemingway Road. My father had been involved in that his whole life, and then he jumped right in with me too. And my brother joined in and helped, and I ran that from 88 to 2011. And I still miss a lot of things about it. But like Gary said, it gets in your blood and it never goes out. So I haven't gotten rid of a single chainsaw, and I still dabble in tree work. If somebody needs some tree work, I go and do it just so I can get that smell of two-cycle back in my clothes. And it's definitely something that's in your blood.
Silas Ball, Emily's brother, Steve and Janet's grandson. I also spent some time with my grandfather, Steve, in the woods logging. I actually remember a little bit of time in his sawmill when I was really young. Wasn't much, but a little bit. I worked for Barry for a while. I helped him. I took away over there part-time for a couple summers back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
And he was good at it too.
And on the other side of the family, my father's side of the family, Henry Town, our great-grandfather, he was in the wood business, mostly cordwood, his entire life. So we got all of that folklore through our father. That was fun. And our father, Lynn Ball, he's locally renowned for his cordwood stacking skills. If any of you have ever driven by, he passed those on to me. I learned at a young age the only thing worse than stacking wood is stacking wood the second time if it fell down. So yeah, got a lot of that, but happy to be here.
And I'm Janet Puffer, Steve's wife, and my grandchildren. And I have gone to the woods with Steve to help mark the logs, to check them, to help him bring them out. I drive the skidder. I used to drive all the equipment that we had and helped him in the mill, take away, and do the edging. So we worked together many years until I decided I'd had enough. And we went into the cordwood business after that. We delivered a lot of cordwood. We cut it down, cut it up, and delivered it. And here we are today. So I am glad my grandchildren were able to be here, because this has been quite a group and quite an experience to learn everything that everybody else knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he used to log brush. He cut the ties and haul them down, and they'd stop there at the Red Barn and keep the horses in there at night time in the winter, because they used to log in the wintertime, because they never logged in the summer or spring like they do now, because it wasn't profitable for them, because they used to have to do other things. And so that's what the Red Barn they used to use, because my great-grandfather had 18 teams, and the horse barns are still one of them is still standing down there in North Amherst. My cousin owns it now, because she inherited all the property. And they still got the names of the horses and the stalls and the hay racks and everything. Wow. She preserved all of it.
18 teams?
18 teams. Mm-hmm. And his father used to talk about how they logged when he was a kid, and they lined all from Shrewsbury Hill down on the other side towards Prescott. They would line the whole sides of the roads with all the timbers and the cordwood and everything that they cut out and stored it to dry.
Wayne Gary. We started out logging. I was 8 years old when I first started carrying the stuff across the road. Everything we cut off, and I would carry stuff across the road. And when we got a little older, we started cutting trees, stuff. away and keep track of all how much they use and or making.
The board feet or something, he got track of that, yeah.
Yeah, and Ralph was the sawyer,
Okay,
and Walter and Earl had horses, and they would do all the pulling, going out in the woods, and another crew would be cutting the logs down, trees down,
okay,
and then let's see, Bill and George, all brothers, was taking the lumber away to the companies where we sold it.
okay. Are these all Carries that you're talking about?
Yeah, they're all brothers.
Okay, all Carries, okay, we got it.
And they would every time we go from one lot to another, we would have to move a shanty for the Earl and Ralph. I know Earl and
Walter.
Walter. Was it Walter? Yeah.
Yeah, they would stay overnight with the horses. We had probably between 4 and 6 horses, and they would take care of the horses at night. And a couple times we stayed overnight with them, just to take care of them, make sure. But every lot we cut, we'd cut nothing under 8 inches of trees.
Okay.
Like nowadays, they just cut everything down. They don't care about the business. We do that, and we went all from town to Row to Heath and every small town, I guess, around.
Way out there. That's way out,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Orange and Athol, and so we just cut every time. And let's see.
Then did you sell the logs right there in that vicinity where you were? If you cut up in Heath, did you sell them up there or over in Orange?
Well, we would cut them up, and then we'd have to haul them in.
It began in 1898 when William and Emma Stratford, his parents, came from England. William and Emma settled on Rattlesnake Road. Their son, Bill Stratford, my grandpa, was born December 1900. As there were many sawmills up and down the Sawmill River, and Bill became a wood chopper by trade. Wood chopping competitions were popular and considered as a great sporting type event.
So back in the summer, my cousin Jonathan Stratford lives in Iowa, searching around, and he found a film footage of my grandfather in 1930 over in Hudson, New Hampshire at a log chopping contest, which he won. And it's actual film from 1930. So it's no sound. It was back in the early days. So, but it was whoever was doing the film, because he had won so many championships during the 30s, that they came to that, and you can see him chopping and stuff, and then receiving the trophy. And he was 29, and it's pretty cool.
Grim spoke with chopping huge beech trees, rolling them into the Connecticut River. And I remember him telling me those. And I said, beech? And he said, yeah, they were for high heels. So they were in real demand. And it was hard to actually find them after a while. And then he told me about the American chestnut. And how sad that was, because he said they were nice to chop, nice to saw, but dried hard as iron. He eventually had 2 portable mills with several local men working with him, and I have a picture of that with various relatives and stuff. in the mill. One day he brought me to the railroad tracks off Ferry Road in Montague Center. He said that a train would stop and empty cars would load up with lumber, cordwood, and products. The men loading the cars would be running to get the products loaded in a limited amount of time and would be delivered to New York City. So right when you go past Rouse and Elko, Ferry Road's on the left. You just go down a few hundred yards, and right where it's level with the road, you turn in there. It's really brushy now, but it wasn't so much of them. But you could see way down the tracks, kind of around the corner, and he said they would just pull up in all empty cars. He said there would be every product you can think of here, and lumber carts and sleds of cordwood and everything. And he said the second that train stopped, them guys just start running. They run over to the corporate thing and run back up the ramp and load those things because they only have a very limited time. He said you just would not believe the activity here. And now you're just looking, it's just nothing. You know?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you give me a sense of what years that would happen, the busyness at the train and stuff?
Grandpa was born in 1900, so I would imagine it was right around that time or just after, I would think, where he eyewitnessed it anyway. The occupation came at a cost. His own father perished in a logging accident. And I have here a death certificate of Grandpa's own son, John William, who died in a similar accident as a log fell and killed him. My mom, Ruthie, spoke of being 5 years old when her father, Grandpa, came home, and she said that the girls there, her sisters, somebody yelled, "Hey, Mom, Dad's home." And she said, "Uh-oh." They never came home during a work day. And said she remembered opening the back window and taking out John William and carrying him into the house and put him on his bed. Personally, I don't know how anybody could work another day after that. But those folks back then, they just pulled up their bootstraps and went. And this is the death certificate. They were logging in Enfield, Mass, clearing out for the Quabbin. And he was 10 years, 6 months, 11 days. It was January 1st, 1937. And it was New Year's Day, so all the boys were home from school and able to go with my grandpa to the woods. And they had the sled loaded up, and Grandpa cut the corn a little bit, and the sled rode up on a stump. And when it did, the top log rolled off, and all the kids were jumping off, and William didn't make it off. And I guess he might have been actually walking alongside of it.
So just to mention back, just before you guys, people bought the land and the wood, and oftentimes let the land go for taxes after they bought it, which is much different than it is today, of course, because land now has that big value. But the Chapter 61 law came in, which required you to manage your land with a management plan. So look into the future. So most of this timber that came up was not on managed land, but timber does grow. And it does grow fairly fast. Because when I started in business in the early 60s, most of the land was pole-sized wood. I mean, now everywhere you look, there's timber, trees. I mean, so much more than it was then.
How big does it have to be for you to call it a timber tree?
10 is the lowest, 12, 14 now. Diameter.
Him and Jim and my grandpa used to haul regularly down to Westminster, Mass. And Gardner, Mass. Some for the box shops back when they built boxes out of wood.
Yeah.
And then a little later the furniture places. But I remember my father and Uncle Jim hauling box lumber down there even in the 70s. You know, they were still doing some wooden boxes. And then of course corrugated cardboard completely took over.
Was that a box shop right at the railroad tracks there?
Yeah, I believe that was.
Was it?
And then there was
Billings?
a bucket shop right down here on the left. They built buckets. I know they used to supply them too, but there was a lot of round edge lumber. They would just saw it through and through.
Yeah.
They didn't square it. Saw it through and through, sticker it up and put it on the truck, stickered up to high heaven. They had to watch out for the low bridges and head down Route 2 to Westminster, Gardner, down that way. I remember going with them even as a kid, so.
Can
Standing up in
can
the
you
middle of the
explain that
seat.
to me for 1 second, what you just said? Just saw it through and through,
You
not,
put a log on, take a slab, and then just keep going until you got to the point where the log's not gonna stay anymore. Flop it over, set your number, and go through and through till the last one dropped off, and so you'd have the round edge. The box shops liked it that way because they figured they'd get more yield. They
Right.
wouldn't lose all that material off the edges. They could pick and choose where they wanted short ones, long ones, whatever. And I wish I could have found some of the pictures, but I remember as a kid, truck just being, because they stickered it. And they sent it stickered and they unloaded it stickered, and then the box shop would just leave it there and let it dry long enough to use it. And so these trucks would be loaded. I mean, I got a couple pictures over there of square edge loaded pretty high, but these box shop trips were, they wanted to get on all they could, so they stacked it just as high as they figured they could get under the bridges. And they'd head out at 3:30 in the morning so they could, not get picked up by the cops so much. And they'd head right down there, and they'd be there, 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning. There'd be some old timer there to unload them with the machine, and they were still building wooden crates and boxes. Right up into the 70s, I remember that happening. It didn't happen as much. It was only occasional by then.
So Coles, it's been mentioned here a few times, long history, and happy to be here. Thought I would learn something and see what the interest was, knowing Coles has an office or a few buildings full of records that go way back. I'm familiar with half the faces in the room and have worked with in some way, and probably know all the names in the room from our records. I've been fortunate here in Bern, start in the 70s at Coles. In the winter, I started in January 1997, so I'm 27 years in the business now, and have felt fortunate. Coles conservatively managing historically. Hearing Lori talk about cutting all the junk to send to the mill. I was there kind of in this transition from the industry with the mill, and also talking some of the logging changes too, but felt fortunate by the past management that I, as a forester, have something to work with going in there. Hearing the mention of the not cutting under anything under 8 inch, I wasn't sure how all those management decisions were being made.
I don't know what he's talking about. No. I don't remember cutting the stuff or Wayne's slipping in this.
But it just gave me an idea because I've been somewhat spoiled. Coles had an employee, William Gove, in the 50s that I think was an employee that did a little bit of everything, but he also created the map surveys of our land. Not recorded surveys like today, but he had the chain, the 66-foot physical laying the chain out with a staff compass. So boy, am I spoiled with good maps. Today's, the local surveyors come to us knowing we're a resource. We have those maps. So I say we have good records of survey plans from the 50s from Gove. I say we have good records of our timber management from the 70s because of Lori. I think Coles had Lori as a subcontractor,
Yeah, classified.
forestry.
All the land.
Classified.
I was on every lot.
Good.
what, can you tell me what that means, classifying the land?
Chapter 61 to tax.
So land use program here in the state, so probably a good reason why we have the record starting then. I have some plans that show some forest types and diameters, Brushy Mountain showing these 2 to 4 inch trees, 6 to 8 inch trees, not a large diameter, but appreciate the 27 years I've had knowing a lot of it was laid out ahead of me, and my job's not to screw it up. But I crossed paths with Vern at the mill and learned a heck of a lot there. We miss our sawmill. Coles, I think, always in the mill business going back. They were the portable mills in the woods, so maybe one of the first electric mills in the country, but it made sense to bring, they could truck logs to a stationary sawmill that had enough electricity to power. So from the sawmill, the planing mill, I've questioned. I don't know when that was plugged in over there, Vern. But in 1980, Coles, Walter Jones was ahead of my time. I worked with Paul, now Cinder and Evan. But Paul opened a retail store in 1980 to sell sawmill products. The store still does well there today. There's not as many sawmill products. We made the tough decision to stop the sawmill in 2009-10. So then I think I heard maybe Gary mention pine oak and hemlock to Coles and purchased the Lashwaves. That was the Coles sawmill, pine oak, hemlock. The timbers weren't creating that market. That was the niche. Every log to the mill was to create a timber or timber frame construction.
And I remember deer hunting and stuff and finding old sites, you know, you'd see this big mound or whatever go over and that was a sawdust pile. Quite a bit was still evident, but you'd come across these all over in the woods. And once the Coles got the permanent mill and we were going along and I was managing the mill at the time. And by that time we had debarkers because there were skidders and they come in muddy. So you peel the bark off. And the bark mulch got to be a popular thing, and for landscaping. And then the wood chips became very popular. You started chipping all the slabs, which used to be just waste, a lot of it, and started chipping that. And so you're doing trailer loads of wood chips. And then they started grinding those up for mulch and doing the coloring of red and black and so forth. So that became popular. And then you get the sawdust for all the farmers, and then in the planing mill you got the shavings. So I was looking at one time, and I'm looking at all of our income, and I'm like, wow. So I started figuring out all this income for byproducts that they didn't used to get with lumber. But that's a way that sawmilling really changed when it came down to a permanent mill compared to all the ones out in the middle of the woods.
That's where all your ski areas came from in the Berkshires. They have to buy the damn mountain to get the timber. And then they're stuck with this mountain, they didn't know what to do with it. It's where Kelly's Irish House, remember that? That's where they came from, out of the Kelly Hardwick Company.
So they would log it and then they would.
They cut it off, and then they got this piece of land that back in the late 50s and early 60s was worthless. So instead of letting it go for taxes, a couple of them decided that skiing started to come in, and they built ski areas out of them.
Pictures are good. I'd like to provoke a couple of stories from my grandfather since he's here.
Good.
We heard of quite a few accidents in the woods. I remember him telling me a story of my great uncle on the other side of my family working for him, Elmer Ball, had a tree come down right on top of him, drove him halfway into the ground. I don't know if you that story. Another story I want to hear you tell is about your father, how he used to drive a team when he was a kid.
Yeah.
He used to haul water up Brushy when he was just a kid, and he used to haul oak ties back to Cushman to the rail depot.
Early on, when I was in business, Bruce Spencer and Lori Kennison here put a lot up here for sale, pine, just above the high tension lines up here. And I think it was 400,000 feet of pine. It was a big lot, beautiful tree. And I bid on it against all the big boys. And I won the bid by $400. And that was a beautiful lot and beautiful timber. But I'll tell you, that was the only time I ever beat them guys at anything.
Tell me about bidding against big companies. I mean, can they underbid you very readily most of the time?
Well, it was.
It's changed dramatically because when I first started, the sawmills basically bought all the wood. And loggers were at the mercy of dealing with a sawmill man on what they would get for it. But then when the Canadian markets opened up, then the loggers started buying lots. And for the first time, they could really control the economy that way. And so loggers were able to, was Dylan, you know, finance equipment. Before they never really could do that. So that Canadian market was a big boom to the loggers.
When did that start?
That's
The 90s?
Yeah.
I think it was a little before that.
So without the mill today, we subcontract our timber harvesting now. I enjoyed that marketing of it, so we still try to market the wood ourselves, contract our loggers, and sell to the markets, and we mix it up. It's not committed to one mill. You know, we like to keep it local. It's not Massachusetts anymore, you know, southern New England. We're mostly trying to keep it in the region, but we still have wood that does go to Canada. Do work with Dylan today. You know, he can probably cut what I sustainably manage harvest level in a year. He could probably do it in a few months the way it's mechanized today. The lumber industry, without having the local mills, and how do we continue to keep our land and manage it in a sustainable way? And then with the timber harvesting side of it, I think probably top of everyone's mind today is the weather and how we work around the weather. We like frozen and dry, and we get it, we can't schedule it, so the challenge is today.
Dylan, I told you that somebody, when I told them you were coming, said, "Oh, you got somebody coming with modern logging."
It has
Can
changed
you
a little
tell
bit.
us a little bit about that?
Well, I'm set up for cut to length logging. So there's a handful of different styles of new mechanized logging. Cut to length being one of them, which is normally two pieces of equipment. One of them cuts the tree down, de-limbs it, cuts it to length out in the woods. And then the other one picks the finished logs up, carries it out to the side of the road where it can be transported off. So I mean, along with the industry changing, two guys might cut 75 to 150,000 feet of wood in a week, depending on what you're doing, which might have been a whole season for a crew, you know, a while ago.
And you're inside a cab. So
It's much safer.
you don't read about somebody getting hurt in the woods every other week.
And the heater works.
And the radio and.
Yeah, heated seat. Yeah. But it is a whole different dynamic in quite a few different ways. But there's a lot bigger financial aspect of it too, that, you know, if you're working by hand, you get a chainsaw and your overhead's lower, and it all is a different animal.
And if you
The forest is dying, really. Because, we've got the beech leaf disease now, which is even going to kill a tree faster than the beech bark disease. No, the forest, Quabbin lost a couple thousand acres from the last defoliation. You know, we've had defoliations before, we never lost that much wood. And between here and southeastern Mass, we lost about 50,000 acres of oak forest. You know, and it's the insects, but it's other things as well. You know, things are happening in the soil that aren't conducive to growth. So, our inventories show the state lands that the mortality is increasing much greater than growth. So people who think you just leave the forest alone and it's going to sequester all this carbon, forget it, it isn't. You know, we really do have to tend the forest and tend it very carefully, because there'll be a point, I say within 10 years, that mortality is going to exceed growth. So how are you sequestering carbon when mortality is greater than growth? And I see a lot of mortality. I try to keep up on my own
Maples,
woodlot.
yeah.
But, yeah, and someone mentioned about tree health. I think one of the things that I do, and I hunt with a big group of hunters in this North Leverett area. And I think we're doing a valuable thing by lowering the deer population because on my own woodlot, I can't get oak regeneration. When I bought the lot in 1970, you know, I had no problem regenerating every species. Right now, there's just too many deer.
They eat the oak more than other things?
Well, they eat all the hardwoods.
Oh.
But, you know, oak is a key species because it really makes the whole ecosystem work with the acorns. So it's an important tree. And, yeah, one time he was in an area called Egypt Brook down on the Prescott Peninsula. It was a pretty exceptional area for trees. And I thinned out a grove of trees that were quite large. And Wilton said to me one day, he said, you know, I don't mind you leaving big trees out in the forest, but he said, not within sight of the sawmill.